This happened about a decade ago, back when I was a kid living with my parents. We lived on a huge piece of land that was mostly covered with forest. Our house was completely surrounded by trees. It was nice because it meant we could be as loud as we wanted to without disturbing anybody. And our nearest neighbors were a pretty good distance away. The story I'm about to tell happened on a summer night. I was awakened suddenly in the middle of the night by a familiar, ear-splitting shriek. It startled me so badly that I nearly fell out of my bed as my heart jumped out of my chest. I looked around the darkness of my room and saw my 5-year-old brother, Ethan. He was flailing around in his bed across the room, kicking and screaming. I slipped out of bed and stumbled as I rushed over to the light switch and flicked it on. And almost instantly, he stopped screaming. He kicked off his covers and scrambled to get out of his bed. I looked into his face and could see genuine terror as he huddled close to me, keeping his gaze fixed on the open window above his little bed. I turned him towards me. His eyes are wide, and he's hyperventilating. "What's the matter, little buddy? What was it?" I asked him. Before he can answer, my parents burst through the bedroom door. "What the hell is going on in here?" roared my father, who always hated being awoken before work in the morning. "It's Ethan. I think he had a bad dream," I replied. My mother pushes past my father to come look at Ethan, who was still keeping his eyes on the window. She took him over to my bed and sat him down next to her. "What happened, honey? Was it a bad dream?" Ethan didn't reply. Instead, he motioned towards the open window. "Did you see something out there, buddy?" my father asked him, walking over to his window to have a look. "It was a man," Ethan replied with a whimper in his little voice. My father, who was dressed in nothing except for his old blue bathrobe, rushed out into the hallway and into his bedroom. I heard the door to his gun safe swing open. "Alan," my mother called to him, "you don't need to do that. He just had a bad dream." My father came back down the hallway and into the room, his rifle in hand. "Yes, I do," he replied. "Why?" "Because the lock on that window has been broken. Someone tried to get in. You stay here. I'll be back." My mother, who was always so calm and collected, quickly rushed both my brother and I to the safety of her bedroom, where the window was locked, and another rifle was in the safe. I remember feeling a sense of fear because my mother was never afraid of anything. We huddled together in that room for about 15 minutes before my father returned. "Well, what did you find?" my mother asked. My father came in and leaned the rifle up against the closet door. "Nothing," he replied. "But there were footprints outside that window. Someone was there." "Oh, God." "Don't worry. I think our little man here scared him off, didn't you, Guy?" he said to Ethan, giving him a pat on the back. Ethan was silent for a short moment. He just stared into space. "He tried to get me," he said, with a slight shakiness in his tone. The room went quiet. "What do you mean, sweetheart? He tried to pull me outside. He was going to get me." My mother began to tear up as she pulled him close to her. "I think maybe the boy should sleep with us tonight, Alan," she said to my father. "Sure, hon." Nothing happened again after that night. My dad fixed the lock on our window and life went on. It's a story that still gives me chills whenever I think about it. A few days after it happened, I was walking outside with Ethan. I decided to ask him about the man that he saw, even though my parents didn't want me to bring it up to him again. "Ethan, that man you saw, the one who tried to get you, do you remember what he looked like?" I asked. He said nothing. Instead, he looked at me and did that creepy thing he used to do where he folded his eyelids inside out and smiled at me. I never slept in that room the same way ever again. This is something that happened pretty early on in my childhood. I was way too young to comprehend what was even happening, but my mom recently told me after I asked her about it. This all happened at my old house that was out in the country when I was around 4 or 5. I had a couple of neighbors, including my aunt's house right next to ours. Our driveways formed an oval, if that can help create a picture of where this happened for you. It was around Halloween and the trees were all dead along with the cornfields around my house. It was around 8 p.m. when my mom was tucking my siblings and I in bed. Once we were asleep, she went down the hall to her room. My old house was nice, but it only had one story. Apparently, in the middle of the night, I had knocked on my mom's door crying. She got up sleepily and opened it and turned on the lamp in the hall. She crouched down to calm me down and find out what was wrong. She said she'd never seen me cry that much, ever. She asked me what was wrong and I supposedly said, "Why is there a man at the window, Mommy?" My mom's always been a bit cautious about breaking stuff, especially around Halloween. But this time, in her sleepy days, she didn't take me seriously and just thought I was being a 4-year-old and making stuff up. Until I took her to my room, which had a window right above my bed. Apparently, when my mom peeked in, she saw a tall, dark figure duck out of the way. She immediately went into panic mode and grabbed my siblings and put us in her bathroom and locked her room door and the bathroom door. She had forgotten her phone in her panic state and remembered it was on the kitchen counter charging. She told us in a hushed voice to stay in the bathroom with the lights off and not to move even if they heard any noises or anyone calling out to us. I remember her running out of the bathroom and the room door and yelping a few seconds after she got into the kitchen. We had sliding glass doors leading to the backyard, which had trees surrounding it. Apparently, my mom had seen the same man who was watching me sleep through my window. He was at the sliding glass door trying to get in. She explained how his face looked stretched out and gray. His eyes looked dead, and she froze after making eye contact with the man. She quickly scrambled for her phone in the dark and found it. She ran back into her room and locked it, and she did the same when she got into the bathroom. She immediately called the police and stayed on the phone. The cops showed up about 10 minutes later and couldn't find anyone. They had a few cops patrol the area and once stay overnight and watch the house. I can only imagine what would have happened if that man did get in, or what would have happened if I hadn't woken up in the middle of the night and looked out my window. This still freaks me out to this day. When I was younger, I had a nightlight in my room. The older I got, the more I thought I didn't need it. At the age of 6, I took it out of my room. I did have windows in my room, and the moon would shine through the curtains. After I took the nightlight out of my room, I felt as if there was a presence in my room. One night, I woke up and I saw a shadow at my door staring at me. I thought it was my mother because she would always check on me before she went to bed. The shadow stayed there for what seemed to be an eternity. Soon, I drifted off to sleep. The next morning, I asked my mom why she stared at me for such a long time. She was doing something, I can't quite remember what, but she said, "What do you mean, Nivea?" I told her about the shadow standing at the door. I remember my mother being frightened and being on the phone with my father for a good hour or so. I remember watching TV with my parents later that week. We were watching the news. They were talking about some man who would watch over their victims and decide if they were good enough for him to kill. I remember the TV going black and my parents telling me to go to bed. Looking back at that situation terrifies me at what could have happened.